What is going on to all of my Scream fans out there, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are here to break down and discuss Scream 7, full spoilers. I'll be breaking down the plot, talking about the things I thought worked with the movie, things that didn't work, like that ending and the killer reveal. We'll be talking about some possible ideas for Scream 8. Of course, we'll be talking about the ending and so much more. So I hope you got your burnt pizzas ready to eat, and I hope you're ready to hang out like Hannah. We're about to break down Scream 7, full spoilers ahead. So first and foremost, I think it's only right that we talk about the opening scene. We open the film in Woodsboro, where we meet this stabbed superfan by the name of Scott and his girlfriend Madison as they're visiting Stu Macher's house, which has basically become this interactive Airbnb / stab museum. Now, we watch them as they go through the house, and we see all these various Easter eggs from all the different characters that have died in this house. But ultimately, speaking of dying, both of these characters end up dying. Scott gets stabbed in the head. Meanwhile, we see Madison as she fights off Ghostface. She falls on the knife, and she gets put on fire. Now, if I'm being honest, I said this in my non-spoiler review that I wasn't the biggest fan of the opening scene for the fact that it isn't really mentioned at all for the rest of the movie, and also the victims had no connections or ties to any of the characters in this film. But as we know, there are other opening scenes in this series that aren't as important to the overall narrative. So with that being said, it did have some effective moments, and particularly I like the way that they use Ghostface, and I'm also a fan of the two actors. Now, what I liked about Ghostface in this scene, and honestly, as we'll talk about throughout this spoiler breakdown, I liked how Ghostface, I don't like Ghostface who they are, like the reveal of the Ghostface, but I like how Ghostface felt like a ghost in this movie. We see Ghostface in this scene, hiding in the background, hiding in the shadows. They did a really good job of making Ghostface, again, feel like a ghost. But when it comes to the actual kills in this particular scene, they were okay. Like I said, Scott, he gets stabbed in the head. Madison lands on a knife and she gets burnt alive. But we know this is a franchise that has some pretty iconic opening scenes, right? And as you look at this opening scene compared to Scream 1 or Scream 2 or hell, even Scream 6, which I really enjoyed that opening scene, this one just kind of fell short for me. Now, like I said earlier, I felt like this opening scene didn't really have that much of an impact on the overall story because the characters had no ties to the rest of the characters in the rest of the film. But the idea of the killings is to make Sid believe that Stu is alive. Now, as we move along for the rest of the spoiler breakdown, I'm going to be highlighting some of the main points of the plot, as well as talking about some of the most brutal kills in the entire franchise. Now, after the opening scene, we cut to Sidney, who now lives in Pine Grove, Indiana, where she has built a new life for her and her family. Now, we see that Sidney is married to the police chief, and she runs her own coffee shop, and they have 3 children, one of them being teenage daughter Tatum, who is named after Sidney's late best friend Tatum Riley, who we know died in Scream 1 with the gruesome kill on the garage door. Now, early on in the film, they establish there's an unease and there's a tension between Sidney and Tatum because Sidney is very overprotective, and hell, you can't blame her for after decades of trying to escape a serial killer. Now, we see Tatum's boyfriend, Ben, is trying to sneak into her window, which is obviously a callback to the original Scream. And we see that Sidney is not a fan of Ben, and just like why I feel like she has the right to be overprotective, we also know that she's not wrong in thinking that Ben is a killer because obviously she has a bad history with boyfriends in high school. Now, it doesn't take long before Sidney receives a call from Ghostface, who says,
"Hello, Sidney.
Well, you sure know a lot about me for another asshole hiding behind a voice changer."
Oh, I'm not hiding, Sidney. Not this time."
They request for a video call, and they reveal themselves as an aged up, scarred version of Stu. Now, Sid, rightfully so, isn't buying into this until Stu says that he's going after Tatum and he's standing outside her theater where she and her classmates are rehearsing. By the way, since we're talking about the rehearsing of this play, what was the deal with the teacher? I believe the teacher's name was George, who was supervising the play. Now, obviously, the film wanted the audience to believe that he was maybe the killer, that we should have suspicions about him, because we see him in the scene talking about Tatum being kind of timid and not like the best actress in the role that she was portraying in the play. But then later on, Sidney sees him in the crowd. So again, I understand that he was to be used as a red herring, but I thought they were going to do more with him. I actually thought that he was going to maybe be killed at some point, but George was just came and went and just kind of disappeared. But let me know if you all thought that George was going to be maybe a little bit more important based on those 2 scenes that we just talked about. Now at the school, we get one of, if not the most bloody and gruesome kills of the film. While Tatum's friend Hannah's rehearsing with another student, we see Ghostface comes up behind that student and they kill him, which leaves Hannah stuck in the air on the wires and she gets tossed around like a rag doll. Now during the scene, there are two Ghostface present and the kill, woo, boy, what a kill it was. Now if I were to put my money on the two Ghostface that were in this scene, I'm going to go with Carl, who we'll talk about the reveals later in this breakdown, but I'm going to go with Carl and Marco were the Ghostface in this moment. Now let's talk about the kill. We see Hannah is being swung back and forth and Ghostface slashes her arms and legs with their knife in their hand, and ultimately they leave the knife hanging in the air, which splits her stomach open and leaves her guts pouring out. Man, shout out to McKenna Grace. She's such a fun actress. I'm such a big fan of hers. I've been following her since she was a little kid, and this is like her 20th horror movie in her young career, but I wish she was in the movie a lot longer. I wish she was more of a prominent character, but hell, the screen time she got was well remembered, one of the most memorable kills in the franchise. Like, it is brutal seeing her guts come out of her and the way she was strung up in the air. Like, that was a very iconic Scream kill. Like, it's up there with me, not number one, but it's in that top 5 of like Casey from Scream 1, Dewey from Scream 5, Anika from Scream 6, and of course, Olivia from Scream 4. Like, Hannah's up there for me as far as one of the most brutal kills in the franchise. Now, later that night, we see Ghostface hiding in Sidney's attic and holds Tatum at knife point. Now, initially, I'm thinking to myself, they've established that Sidney lives in like Fort Knox, like she has all the security in the world. So I'm thinking like, how the hell did Ghostface manage to get in her house? But as we'll find out later, I guess we can just say that it was one of the Ghostface. It was Marco who maybe hacked into her system to bypass the security cameras or whatnot. That's my excuse for right now. Let me know if you all thought the same thing. As I digress, we see Mark and Ghostface get into a fight, and I'm just going to say it now. I like Joel as an actor, but he got bested every time he encountered a Ghostface in this film, and he's supposed to be the chief of police. He was absolutely wasted in this film to me. Again, I like him as an actor, but I just didn't buy the relationship between him and Sidney. They only had one scene, obviously, but it wasn't a scene that I felt that they were, I don't want to say a happy couple, I just didn't feel that chemistry. And then him being this chief police officer, getting his ass whooped up and down, getting stabbed up and almost died. Mark, you were pretty wasted, my friend. But anyway, Mark is knocked out. He hits his head down the stairs, which was such a weirdly edited scene. But Sidney takes Tatum to the safe room, which was kind of cool to notice she had a panic room. But they try to make their way through the panic room, and Ghostface tries to stab them. That was a pretty fun, exciting, exhilarating scene. But they end up making it out of the house, and then this is where they're confronting Ghostface. As they're chasing Ghostface, we see Sidney helps Mark out by hitting Ghostface over the head with, like, I think it was a mailbox, if I'm not mistaken. But Ghostface is chased down and ultimately gets fatally ran over by Gail Weathers, who also is there with Mindy and Chad. Now, I'm going to be honest with you all. When I saw this scene in a packed theater, it wasn't a critic screening, it was just a normal, regular general audience, they were clapping, they were yelling during the scene, and I'm not going to lie. I thought it was kind of cheesy. It was a little bit corny, but I liked it. Hell, I love this scene. It was just so fun because, again, the adrenaline going on, and you're like, wait a minute, are they about to catch a Ghostface? And they absolutely do. Now, this is a horrible comparison, what I want to say here. I am very aware of that. But immediately, when I saw the scene, I kept thinking to myself, in a weird way, this kind of reminded me of Avengers Infinity War, where Cap and Falcon at the time and Black Widow saved Wanda and Vision when they were going against Thanos' children. Again, I know it's a crazy comparison, but that's where my head went during that scene. And it kind of felt like they were the Avengers, right? Gail comes out of the car and the music's swelling, and then the two brother and sister come out. I'm like, okay, this is the Avengers in the Scream universe. But anyway, Ghostface is unmasked. Sidney recognizes him as a suspicious man that bought coffee earlier in the day, and the police discover that this is a man by the name of Carl, who we find out is a murderer who escaped from the nearby mental institute. All right, let me just get this out of the way now, and I think we can all collectively say this out loud. Let me know in the comments, and let's just say it together. Carl and the other two killers revealed later in this film are definitively, as of right now, we got 7 films in the franchise. We'll probably get an 8th film, a 9th film, so on and so forth. But these killers in this movie are the worst Ghostface reveals of the entire franchise. And the fact, let's just talk about Carl here for a second. He was on screen for 2 seconds prior to his death. Insane, pun intended. We'll talk more about Carl a little bit later, how he got wrapped up into this situation, but let's move on with the rest of the plot breakdown. Now, I don't know why Mark and his daughter didn't leave town, but either way, we see Sidney and Gail go on a mission together to find out more information about Carl, which they're introduced to the supervisor, Marco. Now, as they find out more information about Carl, that he murdered women 20 years ago, he was obsessed with the Stab movies, and he was obsessed with not Sidney Prescott in their reality, but he was obsessed with the Sidney Prescott in the Stab movies. This is where Marco tells them, when Sidney shows a picture of Stu, he's like, oh yeah, I recognize him as a John Doe. He came in 20 years ago. He had no memory. He was walking around town, and he had a room next to Carl. Now, talking about this scene here with Marco telling them that Stu is alive, Stu is one of the most, in this universe, one of the most famous, well-known serial killers of all time in this world, right? So it kind of baffled me that Sid and Gail, who are, by the way, 2 people that dealt with decades of experiences of uncovering serial killers, they took the word of a complete stranger they just met, Marco character, in that he said, oh yeah, Stu was here, and no evidence to back it up. I know he said that if they want information, they have to get a warrant or whatnot, but I'm like, the claims he is making is wild. And them to not have follow-up questions, for them to not do more research. Also, too, the Carl dude that escaped the mental institute, like, why was no one looking for him? Either way, as I digress, I found it very hard to believe that Sid and Gail just believed him on face value without digging deep into what he's actually claiming. And again, the fact that he's saying that the most famous serial killer is just wandering the streets and was never documented about being there, even though he was supposed to be dead, it was just crazy to me. Now, this is where Mindy and Chad become a little bit more important to the story, because they're basically the new versions of Randy and Dewey, right? Chad is Dewey, and Mindy is obviously their uncle, Randy. She highlights that since Ghostface always has a personal connection to the target, that Tatum should bring all her friends together in one place. Now, I like them. They're funny. I love their chemistry. And I love them when they're in 5 and 6 of the Scream movies. But for some reason, their energy, their levity, their insight, their exposition just didn't fit tonally with what this film had to offer. So it wasn't a matter of a bad performance. It's just they didn't fit this film, in my humble opinion. But while Sidney accepts finally getting interviewed by Gail on television to lure in Stu and get his attention and to call her again, we see Tatum and her boyfriend Ben and their friends Chloe and Lucas meet at the tavern. Now, while this is happening, the reason they managed to get out and go to the tavern, and again, I don't know why they didn't go out of town and have like a safe house, Mark was being attacked and repeatedly stabbed by Ghostface at home, and we're at this point in the story, we're led to believe that Mark was killed. Which, by the way, Mark again is the chief of police, and he was silent all day, and no one came to check on him. Now, before the interview ends, I was really kind of engaged. Like, I saw the clip of the interview online a couple days before the film came out, and I thought it looked kind of like cheesy, but it actually kind of, I like where, you know, the questioning was happening, the conversation, because one thing that I thought the film kind of missed the opportunity on was to explore Sidney's trauma and her relationship with her daughter, and why she's so overprotective, and she doesn't want to give the skills that she's learned to her daughter because she doesn't want to have her live that lifestyle, right? She's doing the opposite of Laurie Strode, of what we saw in the 2018 version of Halloween. Like, we saw that Laurie like taught her kid how to be basically her, but Sidney did the opposite of that, right? So I just wish that we could have explored that thematic theme a little bit more, the fear that Sidney puts in her daughter by not teaching her how to become a version of herself. That I wish was explored more. But also, I wish that, and I love Courtney Cox, Gail's an OG, obviously, but in this scene, it happened earlier in the movie when Stu called Sidney on the phone and they before they went to the institute, the mental institute, we saw Gail talking about how she has like nerve damage from being stabbed, not only in the previous films, but in particularly in New York when she almost died and stabbed. I like that. And her talking about the conversation that she has to tell herself 500 times a day that Dewey's, he's gone now and she has to move on. Like that stuff is so interesting. There's a lot of interesting, compelling, thought-provoking conversations and ideas, but the film just kind of skates over it or just flies past it. And by the way, this is coming from someone that actually liked most of the film, but I just wish that we could have explored these themes of grief and trauma and PTSD, but the film just kind of skates over these issues. Now, after finding out that Stu is outside the tavern, Sidney heads back to go save her daughter, and this is the last that we kind of see of Gail. She's not in the main thick of things, right? Which is kind of unfortunate. I thought it was just like, why wasn't Gail involved? But we have Tatum, who's now suspicious of Ben which was was kind of silly that he was running like an AI deep fake technology. Like I understand that he was trying to uncover like, is this real? Is this fake? But the way what he was doing, like you could have said something differently. Like his video was basically saying he's going to kill Sidney. It's like you could have just been like, hey, Tatum, I love you. And you could have made Stu say those words, but this is a red herring. And we see Tatum beats the hell out of him. Like she literally beat his head in with his laptop and she runs away. But as she's doing so, this is where she's being chased by Ghostface. Now, before we move on, let's hear from the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Look, I'm going to be honest with you all. I am not a fan of going grocery shopping. It is so time consuming. I have to shop at so many different stores because one store doesn't have the one thing I need. It is just one giant headache for me. So that's where Factor comes in. Whether it's cold days or you have big goals and you have no time to cook, Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without planning or cooking. Look, for me, it's all about convenience and it's all about having options, and that's why I believe Factor is such a perfect fit for my lifestyle. Quality, functional ingredients including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule, healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. The variety is so great because you have 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious throughout the winter. Options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. And I mean, the convenience alone. It's always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes, no prep, no stress. Right now for me, I'm trying to get back on my healthy kick, so having the available proteins and having the vegetables and the whole foods ingredients is just a perfect fit for me. So head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my special code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and a free breakfast for 1 year. Again, that's factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off. And again, use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for an entire year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. Now, this is for new subscribers only and varies by plan, and one free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. Now, before we get into the chase scene, which I thought was really effective and very suspenseful, which again, as I talked about in my spoiler-free review, I thought Kevin Williamson did a good job of building those suspenseful scenes. It's just the other scenes, the more intimate, the more personal, character-driven narrative moments weren't that well directed, but the scene in the bar. Now, I'm going to talk about some good and the bad. Starting off with the bad, Chloe and Lucas, and of course Hannah earlier in the film, like these characters were just placeholders. Like one of the things I love about most of the Scream films is not only the kills and the thrills and the reveals, but the cast. I like the energy of the cast. I like when we bring in our old characters, mix it in with the new characters. Most of these films have a pretty well likable actors in these roles, and I like the actors in these roles, but they weren't given anything to do. We didn't really get to know them. They weren't able to be teenagers. Like I thought we were going to have the party scene at Hannah's. I thought we were going to maybe get to see the dynamic of them and Tatum, but we just didn't get time with them. Now, getting into the good of this bar scene, we see the characters being knocked off one by one. So first we have which it was kind of a weird staging of how everyone was so quiet. But in the bar is Lucas, Chloe, Chad, and Mindy. Now they're gonna leave, Chad and Mindy, but they end up finding out that they're locked inside the bar. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, we have Chloe alone. She gets attacked by Ghostface, but she manages to survive for the time being. We have her getting a knife, and the staging of that again was a little clunky because we see Chad tries to get her attention, but she stabs Chad, leading Ghostface to stabbing him. Yet again, he's a Dewey. He's going to get stabbed 30 times and survive. And then we see Mindy get stabbed in the stomach, but then they're off to the side. We see that they survive. But then we see Chloe makes it out, and this is where Lucas comes in. He's a tough guy, like, oh, let me do this. And he gets stabbed in the stomach. He's injured. Chloe gets tossed around the bar, and her kill was kind of very lame to me because she died because her face, they look like plastic cups, but they were glass cups, and she got stabbed in the neck. That was kind of corny to me and very underwhelming, but they make up for it. So Lucas is on the floor bleeding out, and this is where Ghostface, let's talk about this. Ghostface picks up Lucas, and Ghostface holds them by the head, picks them up off their feet, and puts his head on the back of, I'm not a beer drinker. I don't go to bars often. Is it called the till? But it was the whatever the beer lever was sharp. He sticks his head on that sharp part of the lever and then pulls it down, and beer comes out of his mouth. I don't know which one was more creative and more brutal. Was it the Hannah kill or the Lucas kill? I think they're pretty equal. But I might go with Hannah because I like McKenna Grace more as an actor. Shout out to Gen V though. But that was pretty crazy. Now, here's the part that makes it even more sinister. Now, we're going to talk about the ending a little bit later, but I need to talk about this scene now because it's very important to really highlight how deep and dark this kill is. It's later said that Jessica was aware that her son was killed, and I was assumed that she was the one that killed her own son. As she says later in the film, she's like, well, my son reminded me too much of my husband, so I had to get rid of him. Now, did she literally do that, or did she have Marco do that? Now, the reason I think that it wasn't her is because, and again, go throughout the franchise, there's a lot of times where we find out who was the Ghostface, and you think to yourself, like, there's no way that you killed. Like, I think about when Dewey's death, and it was revealed that it was Amber who gutted Dewey the way that she did. I'm like, physically, no, that is not happening. I don't give a damn how much psycho energy she has. She was not doing all that to be able to have a knife to go through someone's body the way it did. I wasn't buying it. Either way, I bring all that to say that there have been killers in the Scream franchise that it didn't make sense that was the person that was the Ghostface during that kill. So, going back to the idea that Jessica lifted her son from his own feet, from the weight of his head, and put him on that lever, I'm not buying it, y'all. I think it was Marco. It doesn't make sense logistically speaking of where they would have been placed, but I just have a hard time believing that was Jessica, that number one, killed her own son. I mean, she was psychotic, but killing your own son because he looked like your husband? What are you talking about? But then knowing, whether she killed him or not, she knew her son was going to die, so it's still messed up regardless of how you wanted to look at it. But let me know in the comments below who killed Lucas. Was it his own mom, Jessica, or was it Marco? Alrighty, y'all, let's get down to the nitty gritty and talk about the ending of Scream 7. Now, this scene was pretty great to me. We see Tatum, who I thought was a really good 2.0 Sidney in this film. Like, she held her own as a Scream girl, or a final girl in this case at the end of this movie. But the chase was really thrilling. You know, we see Ben finds her in the middle of the street and he gets stabbed and killed. Kind of another anticlimactic scene. But we see Tatum again. I just like the way that it was staged. I like the score in that scene. And again, they made Ghostface feel like a ghost because there was a point in the film where there was a shadow of the bottom of Ghostface's costume. Again, made it seem like there was this gigantic ghost chasing her in the streets. That scene was really effective. Then this followed by Tatum going to her mom's coffee house. We see, obviously, we have Sidney chasing her daughter, trying to find her daughter. She calls her phone. Unfortunately, the phone is not on vibrate. Ghostface hears the phone in the coffee house, knows the code, which we find out later that was Marco. And again, I'm assuming Marco knew the code of the coffee house because obviously Jessica is best friends, or at least she thinks she's the best friend of Sidney. But she probably, if they are as close as they say that they were earlier in the movie, she probably would have known the code of her coffee shop. So Ghostface is chasing Tatum, and Tatum goes in the office. She gets the gun. She's too afraid to use it, but she gets encouragement from her mom. She finds out through the cameras and oh man, talk about cameras. I wish the technology and the AI, which we'll talk about here in a second, was more effective. But she uses the camera to help her daughter navigate where Ghostface is. She shoots Ghostface through the walls. Obviously, rule 101 in this franchise, you got to shoot them in the head to make sure they're dead. As she's going to do that, she doesn't pull the trigger soon enough. Marco gets up and she fights him off for a little bit, and she's about to escape. This moment got to me. As she's about to escape the coffee house, the second Ghostface, as we'll later find out to be is Jessica, comes up, and they pretty much tag team her and they get Tatum. Now, Stu calls Sidney again and reveals that Tatum is being held home captive and bringing it back to the first one. But then this part, and this is one of the weakest parts of this film, Sidney finds a television message from Stu and he proceeds to change his face into all the previous Ghostface. We're talking Nancy Loomis, we're talking Roman, and we're talking about Dewey. This scene was bad. I'm sorry, guys. And then how do you not have Emma Roberts come back? Like that, what are we doing? And then why don't you have Billy come back? Like those are people that meant, like those killers were the most impactful to her life. Like why didn't we have Billy and Emma Roberts come back as Jill? Why didn't we have Jill? That would have been a perfect time to see, personally, one of my favorite ghost faces in the franchise return. But again, I just hated that moment and the idea of AI deep faking, the confusion, is it real, is it fake? I mentioned earlier, there are some really interesting ideas in this film. Unfortunately, the execution is just done so poorly. Like, oh my goodness, the use of deep fake. We could have with the film, and we know this franchise is so great about being so meta. What it has to say about slasher movies in the first one, about sequels, about legacy, about toxic fandom, about, cancel culture, what we saw in Scream 6 with Sam being looked at as a victim online. And it's so much this film has to say about the culture that we live in, but I just wanted them to go deeper with the AI, pun intended, with the deep fake and the AI, but it just kind of fell flat for me. I will say the only thing that was slightly entertaining about the AI aspect, Matthew Lillard is a national treasure. Him as Stu, what he was saying, being all witty on the phone, like that stuff was funny because it's like Stu again, seeing him even though he wasn't alive. But it was fun to see Stu. It's just how they brought him back, how they brought back all these other legacy characters was just a wet fart for me. Now, Cindy goes outside where she finds Tatum tied up to a chair, which again is a callback to Scream 1. And this is where the film is just nonsensical. As someone that liked this movie, this is the worst ending of any of the films. This is the worst killer reveal of any of the films, and the motives are idiotic. First person that reveals himself is Marco, who explains that he used to work at Google as an information tech, and he was the one that created Stu as the deepfake, as the AI. Stu isn't alive, as he says. He's just alive in spirit. So I guess we can all kind of put our Stu's alive in the can. Or could we? He could still. If you all know the original script for Scream 3, Stu is in jail and he has his cult. You can still do that. But I think they're saying right now, definitively, that Stu is dead. Now, we have the second Ghostface come out to pull out Mark, who's still alive with his stab wounds, punk-ass Mark. We see the other Ghostface unmask themselves to reveal themselves as Sidney's close friend and close neighbor, Jessica. Now, let me just be clear. Anna is a great actress. She played Crazy just a year ago. For those that watch Netflix U, she got to play 2 roles in that season. She was the best part of that season, by the way. Her campiness, her craziness was effective. It plays into the absurdity of a psycho killer. The motives. She explains that after reading Sidney's story, she took the meat of like being a final girl, being like controlling your own destiny, fighting back to your abusers, which is a callback to earlier in the film. They make it very explicit, to just kind of sneaking in there, that she left her husband, her abusive husband, which, by the way, this is another reason why I hate the reveals. Marco gets one scene before we see him as a killer. Jessica gets 2 scenes, the one in the coffee shop and then outside of Sidney's house when they're attacked from the person by Carl. So 3 scenes total from our killers. That is so underwhelming. That has to be the least amount of screen time for any Ghostface killer of all time. It is so piss poor that they weren't more integral into the story. But then their motives. Again, she read Sidney's book. She mustered up enough courage to kill her husband. I don't know how she got away with murder, but she killed her husband. But then she was going to be okay with being this killer. She still was a fan of Sidney, but it wasn't until Sidney did not appear in New York, which, by the way, take a shot at home for how many times this film mentioned Scream 6. I love that they brought it up, but they brought it up like every other scene. Like, oh, what happened in New York? What happened in New York? New York, New York, New York. Either way, she got mad at Sidney because she didn't go to New York to continue the legacy of, closing down a chapter. She was disappointed by that, right? Which, if you think about it, this is a little bit of that Scream meta-ness of like, they're aware of how Sidney, Neve Campbell, the actress, wasn't in Scream 6 and what the fandom thought of her not being in Scream 6. They were upset, right? So it's like Jessica, in a way, is like Richie and Amber of like being those crazy fans that were upset about their franchise being handled differently. So that is a meta-ness of Jessica. Like, I hate that you weren't in New York, so I'm going to kill you now. That's fine, whatever. But execution, it all boils down to it, which the next part is ridiculous. So she had a mental breakdown because Sidney didn't go to New York. She was disappointed by her. So she spent time, I guess she checked herself into a mental institute. That's where she met Marco, and that's where she obviously met Carl. And this is where they've come up with the plan. So mind you, even though it's weak sauce, her motives are clear even though they're stupid. Please explain to me why Marco and Carl, I'll give Carl the excuse if he's insane, he's crazy, he's already a murderer, so he's like, sure, I'll tag along if I can kill more people. Hell, I'm down. But what's Marco's motive? He just seamlessly was a normal guy who worked at Google doing IT deepfake technology. And by the way, how did he lose that job? Again, why we didn't have more screen time with them is baffling to me. But what was Marco's motives? He just wanted to kill people? Like, I don't get it. Again, I can buy a little bit into Jessica's backstory and her motives, even though they're stupid. But Marco and Carl, what the hell? So long story short, after she gets Marco and Carl to be in her dream team of killing people for no reason, she moved next to Sidney and so on and so forth. She reveals it. Again, this is where she says she killed her son. This is where we see her idea is to repeat the traumatic events that Sidney has experienced to turn her into the final girl, but she wanted to kind of turn her into Nancy Loomis in regards to a crazy mom. She's finally snapped, and then she wanted Tatum to be the new Sidney. So again, toxic fandom, creating the narrative, fan fiction, that's where she's at. Neither here nor there. While she's given the exposition, her monologue, we see that Mark, who's all stabbed up, manages to put a knife in her shoe. She hits Jessica in the head, and speaking of the head, we see Sidney, who put one of her guns down, but smartly she had another gun in her back pocket and shoots Marco in the head, killing him. This leads into a final showdown where we see Sidney versus Jessica. We see a kind of a rehash, if you want to call it that, of the rage where we saw from Sam stabbing the killers in Scream 5 and 6. We see Sidney doing that with the weapon. She stabs Jessica in the stomach and Jessica attacks her, but then Tatum shoots her in the head. As they say, you have to shoot the killer in the head multiple times. Jessica runs at them like a psycho. Speaking of violence, I know Kevin Williamson and some of the actors like Neve Campbell have said, Scream 6 was so violent. Why does Ghostface have a shotgun? Meanwhile, they shoot Jessica's face off. Literally, Nick Cage face off, John Travolta face off. They shoot her so much her face falls off. That was pretty violent. Now we wrap up the film where we see Sidney thanks Gail. She trusts her now. She now has faith in Tatum, and she wants her to be more like her mom, and she wants to take on the name of Tatum where she can trust her daughter and believe in her daughter. We see with Gail's blessings, this is kind of the mid-credit scene, I guess you want to say. In the mid-credit scenes, there was like a little joke earlier in the movie that Mindy wants to be the better version of Gail and be a reporter, and she was doing all the stuff behind her back. But we see, even though she was stabbed in the stomach, her brother was stabbed as well, that Mindy gets her chance to do the news reporting, and that's the end of the movie, but also the mid-credit scene. So we broke down the film. We talked about the highs and lows, the kills, the stuff that made no sense. But where do we go from here is my next question. Scream 8 Kevin Williamson has publicly said if the movie is successful, we'll continue. Neve Campbell says she has ideas. What does that mean? Now, I do think this film will be successful. I don't know if it's going to be the highest grossing film in the franchise, but based on my audience, it was a packed house. Based on the pre-ticket sales, I think it's going to be one of the more profitable films in the franchise. But again, where do we go next? I am a Neve Campbell fan, but I just feel like we've done everything we can with Sidney. We've seen her be her mama bear in this film, protecting her family, and like I don't know what else is left on Sidney's to-do list besides if you kill her husband or kill her other kids besides Tatum. I don't know what you do with Sidney. So obviously that leaves, if we do and probably inevitably get Scream 8, it's going to be Tatum. Tatum's going to be Sidney. She's going to be the lead of the film. Now, does that mean we're going to see Scream 2 over again? We're going to see her go to college and, you know, a new Ghostface emerges from the shadows? I mean, sure, but who would be the Ghostface? You know, I jokingly said the whole Stu Scream 3 thing is still on the table, but I think they're definitively shutting the door. Stu is not alive. He is dead. But like, where would a killer come from? And it would have been nice if Jessica was like Stu's sister, but I'm just trying to think in my head, what would be a next killer reveal? Who would be, what are the motives? What other family members out there could pop up again? I really feel like if you're going to come back with Scream 8, you got to go crazy. Like, you got to make a stab movie. It got to be supernatural. Like, I just don't know creatively, where do you go next besides the obvious answer is it's going to be a Tatum-focused story. She's going to be the final girl. She's going to be her mom. Do you kill Sidney in the next one? Is that where you go next? Do you have Gail become the killer, you know, with her PTSD, her, you know, she's so fed up with all the stuff she went through? Where do we go with the Scream 8? Let me know your theories, your predictions. Let's have some fun about where this franchise goes next, which it's going to be a Scream 8. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we've talked about the film. We've had some fun, at least I did, talking about what worked or what didn't. We talked about the kills. I'm going to make a ranking video, but I'm just going to let you all know this isn't at the bottom of my list, but I'll share that in the coming days. But we have made it to the end. I want to thank you all for watching or listening, because this will be available in podcast form. But if you all enjoyed yourself, do me a favor on the YouTube side of things, hit the like button, hit the hype button, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and consider subscribing. If you're listening to this on podcast, leave a comment, like the podcast, leave a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate it. Alrighty, y'all. I thank you so much. I know this film comes with so much controversy. I know some people liked it, like myself. Some people loved it, which I didn't. Some people hated it, which, you know, I can understand. And then some people, unfortunately, just allow, and I get it. What happened with Melissa, I'm on her side of things. It was so effed up what they did to her. But I left it at the table. I didn't bring that into the film. And I know some people, unfortunately, did. But neither here nor there. Scream is a franchise that means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to you all out there too. It's unfortunate the way the films have went down the last few years as far as the negativity and all the controversy surrounding it. But I do hope if this franchise moves forward, which it will, that we can get back on the same page collectively as a fandom. But, you know, that's a long, kind of hard thing to accomplish. But thank you all for watching or listening. Hope you all stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.